I try to start every day with what I call the body prayer, and it always starts with, may I remember. I know what we're saying is what we already know, but we've forgotten. My prayer begins with always, may I remember to breathe. May I remember I'm enough. Whatever it is, it's what we know, but we've forgotten. And it's never conscious.
Right.
It's not like I'm waking up like, I'm going to be miserable today. By golly.
Welcome, Jen Pastiloff, author, teacher, speaker, soul activist. I don't know if you call yourself that, but I figured that was kind of relevant. What do we think?
I like it. Kiese Lehman once called me a heart magician, and if anyone doesn't know who he is, that's a crime. Go read his books. But he called me a heart magician, and I really love that.
That feels like an accurate representation. And for those of you listening, Jen Pastiloff is the author of the book On Being Human, which is a memoir of waking up, living real, and listening hard. You know, one of the quotes that you have on your webpage that I love is, when I get to the end of my life and I ask one final question, what have I done? Let my answer be, I have done love. That's delicious.
Mm-hmm. It's my favorite. It's everywhere. I have people have started using it, with my permission, and made these tiles and these magnets, and I can't get enough of it, even though it's mine. It's I want to be reminded of who I say I am. That's who I say I am. So having those things all over the house is not a bad thing. I don't mean that in an ego way, but maybe I do.
Well, and why would it even be bad? Like, what a healthy sense of pride to recognize one's work as being transformative for oneself too. You know, like sometimes I'll read things that I've written and I'm like, "Ooh, that was actually pretty good." You know, you kind of just get oh, I could use that message right about now that I wrote to myself before that I needed to reread.
One of the things I say ad nauseum, I say it every morning, I say it throughout the day. It's part of my prayer. It's, may I have the courage to be who I say I am. And before we started recording, we were talking about courage. And that's courage, right? So having reminders, I'm really big on that. I have sticky notes all over, the magnets, the things, but having reminders helps. That's at least for my AD brain. But may I have the courage to be who I say I am. And if I say, I am someone whose most important value is doing love, that we could spend 10 years talking about what that means. But if I say that, then damn it, I want to be able to go to bed at night and go, I did love.
How might you look at the end of your day or even the beginning of it? Like, what would that look like, you know, in your day to day, in your way of being?
Actually, a couple of days ago, we had a meeting for our beloved mind, and I was pulling rabbits out of hats on that day. Just, I don't know how I got everything done. I was flying to a funeral on the red eye, and I know you're not on social anymore, but so you didn't get the update probably, but my son was crying, hitting himself, and he was like, "Mommy, don't leave me." And Robert was away making a movie, and I listened to my gut, and I didn't doubt myself, and I didn't go.
Wow.
I made this choice. I know. And well, so there's that wasn't the example I was going to use, but that was one that was doing love. And my friend who died in this freak accident last week, that's what she wanted me to do, right? She would have wanted me. She would have said, "Jen, don't be an asshole. Stay with your son." But then the next day, I wanted to get some cookies. I wanted some comfort. So I was walking down the street. There's a little place on the corner. I live in Ojai now, and it's so cute. People always put things out. Like, it's a very here, take it kind of place, So a lot of my furniture I found on the street, and anyway, there was a car, a big car, a toy car. And I paused for 1 second and I was like, keep walking, because my son has more toys than is humanly possible. I didn't know if it was broken, whatever. And so as I was walking back from a little bit far away, I saw a man, I couldn't tell how old he was, on crutches, and he was holding the toy car and was holding it up so it was in the sun, and it was just this beautiful image. So I was taking these pictures because I practice beauty hunting, which is a tool to stop as often as you can and find what's beautiful in the right now. And that is to cause us to pay attention. It's hard. It's hard for me. I've ADD. It's hard to not float away. So I constantly look for what's beautiful. And so I saw this man on crutches, and it was so It was weird. It's like a grown-ass adult, and he's on crutches, and he's, like, examining the car like he's gonna buy it, but it was beautiful, and I was taking photos and then he looked up and saw me, and so then I went over and I started talking to him, and I said, I should have asked you, may I take your photo? And I started taking photos, and we had this, like, beautiful conversation, and I could tell that he was so surprised that I stopped to talk to him. He said, like, hey, this car ended up being a really great conversation piece. And I said, it sure did. And have a beautiful day. Gabriel was his name. And I think about this a lot, how often I stop and talk. This isn't me giving myself a pat on the back or anything, or maybe it is because I believe in giving ourselves a medal. But how often I stop and talk to people and ask questions and get curious and pay attention to something that a lot of people would normally miss. And that is doing love to me because so much of our lives is spent missing the moments,
Yeah.
missing the beauty, not stopping, being too busy, looking at the phone, I don't know why people are so afraid to engage. And I'm not saying every time you're on an airplane, you have to talk to the person next to you, or, if you're exhausted, not at all, but the willingness to be open, right? May I be open? May I remain open? For miracles, for beauty, for love, for whatever. So that came to my mind, just stopping and having this beautiful random conversation. I said, is it for you, the car? He goes, yeah, I'm going to clean it up. He goes, or maybe there's someone that's going to want it. And I don't know, it's just this gorgeous conversation with the stranger on crutches on my street. At first I thought he maybe was houseless, and that also didn't matter. Just talking to another human being.
And you think about how few of us actually take that time to do that anymore. When you look at a lineup at Starbucks or something like that, you see everyone's on their phone and there's such a aversion to boredom. What are we afraid we're going to find in the space between the stimuluses? And maybe it's more of ourselves. Maybe it's more connectivity. Maybe it's more vulnerability. Like I think of Zuckerberg talking about Meta, right? This world that is online. And I'm like, why don't we just create that here? Like, why are we figuring out how to present our best avatar on a digital thing instead of...
Dude, I don't know, Mark. I don't know, but you figured it out, it seems. You're on it. I mean, I love you and I'm envious, and you're like a role model for me because I do love it. I do. I love it. And I've always been exactly who I present. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
obvious. I've always been that and that connector and all. But like, my God, if I didn't have to like do so much, I wouldn't. It's just that it pays a lot of my bills, and it's the way, I have these courses, these writing courses, and it's how people know about it. But to answer your question, I don't know. And I'm proud to say that I do. I am that person. And I mean, people are like, I can't take you anywhere, Jennifer Pastiloff, because it's true. And I mean, if you watch me, if you're like a fly on the wall watching me, it's hilarious. I just stop and talk to people and ask questions. And my whole life, people would joke, Jen, I have friends I've had for like 35 years. They go, Jen, what? You always get free things in stores. And I used to think, and I realize why. Because since a child, I go in and I talk to everyone, and I'm just really kind, and I treat everyone like we're all the same. And so eventually, like, people are like, don't worry about paying for the parking today, and here it's just like always happened. And it's not why, but I think, my God, we miss so much by allowing ourselves to be open to everything and everyone that's around us.
Yeah, the possibility of what you're going to find in a conversation that you've never had with someone you've never met. I think of all the crazy synchronicities that have occurred because of things like that.
I know!
Kai was making fun of me the other day because I didn't go into the WeWork that's in Las Vegas. And it was such a good location. I loved going there. I got to know the people there. I got a message from some of the people that work there just saying that they missed my presence in the place. And it was such a beautiful message to receive. And I showed it to Kai because she's always like, you're the mayor of wherever you go. Like, you love shaking hands and kissing babies. But I really just love getting to know people. I love getting to know what makes them tick. And inevitably, I learn something from everyone. And I don't know, there's something beautiful about that, to be able to see everyone as a teacher, which I think in a way allows us to see ourselves as teachers too.
I have to say, that's probably why I fell in love with you, Kai. Don't worry, I don't mean in that way. When someone's fallen lovable, which you are, and it's allowing ourselves to be fallen lovable. And in order to do that, we ourselves have to be fallen lovable. And that means exactly what we're talking about, be open, right? But that's why I fell in love with you so quickly, because I saw a direct reflection of myself. Because people also call me the mayor. It's not anything like egotistical or political. It's genuinely like I'm just so open, and I talk to and I engage. I properly engage. I'm going to give you a quick example because I love this one. I was walking to this same place, Farmer and the Cook. It's on the corner where I got the cookies 2 months ago. And there's a little back area of it that it looks like a field, and kids can play in it, and some people play music. And Robert and I were there with two friends of ours, and Charlie went into the field to play because he saw a kid from school. And I went to go check on him, and there was a girl. I couldn't tell if she was from far away how old she was. She had fairy wings on, and she was sitting at the picnic table drawing with crayons and markers and the fairy wings. And then she had three stuffies. Charlie calls them stuffies, three stuffed animals, mini ones, on the table watching her. I got closer and I was like, okay, she's not a kid. I was like, I think she's like 22. And I just went up and started talking to her. I was fascinated by her. She's 22 years old. And then Charlie came up and they started coloring, and they sat and they colored for like an hour. So I started asking her all these questions. I said, oh, I said, can I take your picture? And after I did, she asked me why I did that. And I said, well, I go beauty hunting, and you're the most beautiful thing I've seen today. And I love how you're wearing fairy wings. And she said, well, life is short. I want to do what makes me happy. And she was just the coolest person. And so my son, who was 5 at the time, he said, Mommy, can you get her number? And I said, of course. And now she babysits for us. And every time she comes, she has her fairy wings on, and she's so self-expressed. And the thing is, I stopped that day and I sat with her for so long and found out about her and asked questions where I know so many people that would have been like, look at that cool that was sitting over there with fairy wings on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Or just been like, oh, that's cute. But like, I was so curious, like, how cool are you? Because at that age, even if I wanted to wear fairy wings, I wouldn't have had the courage to walk out in public with fairy wings on?
No, I definitely wouldn't. At 22, I was too busy trying to dance on a
No, now
speaker.
I would.
Yeah, now I'd be fine. I think I wore some wings the other day. I forget what it was for. Oh man, I went to a party and
Well, of course you did.
yeah, I remember I went to a party. We were going to a birthday party, and I got given wings and a bedazzled hat, which I'm pretty against bedazzled things that look like they're made by Ed Hardy, or I'm just not into Ed Hardy.
And that word bedazzled is so awesome. And wait, I forgot one thing. I was videoing. I happened to be videoing at this moment, and Charlie I could tell he was looking at her with confusion, and he goes, "Are you a grown-up?" And she answered very genuinely, and she went, "Sometimes." And I could not believe I happened to capture that moment. And I thought that right there, sometimes.
To not lose the essence of the view of the child, and that be okay, right? To know that you can switch between adulting, bill paying mode, and also go into curious adventure, child mode.
Right. But see, you and I, right, we're a lot older. We know that now because we've done all the work, and we're finally like, okay, I finally realized that. She's 21 years old. It's so, because at 21, I thought it was so mature. And at 21, I did not grasp that.
No.
Right.
No, I definitely didn't grasp that.
Doing love looks like, that's the message I really want to impart upon folks, is it can be anything, and you get to define it. And we know in our knowing parts when we're doing love, when we're leading a life, being love, doing love, operating from love, and when we're not.
To be able to choose that resonance, I think, is often foreign for people. I've been thinking a lot lately about how when a behavior is just not common, we consider it abnormal. But sometimes what is common is actually abnormal. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is common, it's like in dating, when sort of the dating rules became unconsciously changed, where you would text someone and then you'd be like, hey, let's go meet for a coffee. But if the person you were about to meet for coffee that you'd never talked to on the phone called you, you'd be like, this person's crazy. They called me. Even though that is obviously the smart thing to do, would be talk to the person on the phone before you go meet with them in person. And it's because it's become uncommon, so it's considered abnormal, as opposed to it. We know logically it's a lot smarter. And I think we do that with a lot of things. Like, it's common to see people settle in relationship. It's common to see people settle for themselves. It's common. And it's common to see people resign to the lives they have and forget about pursuing joy. Or, yeah, and forget is probably the right word, because it's not like we're actively choosing that we want to live a joyless life. It's that it's often common. As you know, I eliminated the use of caffeine, and now I've reintroduced it just a little bit in me choosing how it participates in my life, which I like being in control of my relationship with any substance that stimulates me and my mind. And add to that I really wanted to find something that allowed my brain to perform at its best possible level. I'm in conversations all the time, I'm recording videos, I'm doing podcasts, and so I need to be at the highest performance I can possibly be. So I've been exploring things like nootropics and adaptogens, and recently just brought on board Cured Nutrition. I absolutely love this company. I love its origin story. It's fully aligned with my values and the integrity to which I want to live by. The product that I love is called Rise, and it's a nootropic that's formulated by their in-house clinical herbalist. And it contains a blend of lion's mane and cordyceps mushrooms, rhodiola, ginseng, and a broad-spectrum CBD. I love this product. It has allowed me to have greater mental clarity and performance. There's no caffeine in it, so in that time of that midday coffee, I don't have to take it. You get no jitters, you get no crash, and you're getting those functional mushrooms, the adaptogens, and the cannabinoids. And it leaves your brain on fire, and your to-do list just gets crushed. So this company, as I mentioned, I love, and they are extending an exclusive offer to you, my listeners. You can go grab Rise and any of their other products for 20% off. Just go to www.curednutrition.com/createthelove and you use the code createthelove at checkout. Once again, that's CURED nutrition.com/createthelove and use the code createthelove at checkout to save 20%. Remember, that product is called Rise, and it is incredible.
I try to start every day with what I call the body prayer, because it's generated from our own body. And it always starts with the words, I'm obsessed with the words, may I remember. And the reason I choose those words, and I have people who work with me when they create their own prayer, at least start with that. I like the repetition. I'm a poet. I like to say it again and again, but start with it is because I know, not I think, I know what we're saying is what we already know, but we've forgotten. So, like, my prayer begins with always, may I remember to breathe. May I remember I'm enough. Whatever it is, it's what we know, but we've forgotten. And I mean, you're so right about that. It's not, and it's never conscious.
Right.
It's not like I'm waking up like, I'm going to be miserable today. By golly.
There's a compassion to that, because you're right. It's not like we actively, there's almost like we punish ourselves by thinking we choose compensatory strategies or behaviors that are toxic. And sure, there's a sense of responsibility to the choices we make, but we choose those behaviors like repeated relational patterns, repeated life patterns. We choose them because maybe it's safer. Maybe there was a punishment to creativity and joy. And so I think there's a compassion to may I remember, as if you once had it. And that although your patterns today might not be in honor of what you're seeking, they have existed for a reason. And I like that all yours start with that.
And think about the language, like the specific language of may I remember. There's a softness to it, and it's an invitation. It's an invocation. It's not like, I better remember, motherfucker. It's may I remember, right? It's so soft to me. It's like, it's gentle, it's tender, and it does have compassion. It's may I remember. And here's the second part of it that I think is so important. So it's a ritual. I'm all about being honest. This morning, it's my son's birthday. We woke up really early. We did a thing. I fell back asleep. So I didn't do it this morning. But let's say the ritual, you start the morning with the prayer, with this, whatever words you choose, and hopefully you pick words that resonate with you, not something that's too woo or too whatever. But let's say you say, some of the things I say are, may I remember to not take myself too seriously. That's really important to me. I think you know that. May I remember to not compare myself today. Today, so I put a lot of TMI in it, which could be too much information, but it's today, may I, because everything's today, right? Today, may I allow myself pleasure. May I remember to drop my shoulders. Today may not be an asshole to myself and to others. So let's say that's my prayer, and I start the day with that, and I'm feeling really good. I wake up and I'm running late for my podcast with Mark Groves and I can't find my microphone and I start to get mad at myself and I'm like, Jen, that you're back on your bullshit. This is what you do. See, you're a fuck up. And then I hit my foot and I start bleeding and then I knock over my coffee on my book, and then I'm telling myself I'm an asshole and all the things. So I get to the end of the day and I go, well, I'm full of shit because I started off right saying, today may I. So then what? What's the second part of the ritual? The second part of the ritual is letting yourself off the hook. And so I encourage like to actually have a book, the off the hook book, and like to write it down, dump it out. So you go to bed empty, clear, you're not ruminating on it, and then you get to begin again. Begin again. Begin again. It's not like, well, that's just the way I am. You get to begin again the next day.
Right. It's not as if it's like, that's over and I'm still this forever now because I made this one choice. The impermanence of being, there's a sense of responsibility that comes with the recognition that you can be different in any moment, but there's also a sense of liberation. They happen in together because there is like, hey, if I can be anyone in any moment, and that means I can let go of who I've been or having been an asshole or whatever it is, then I can also be more loving, more tender, more compassionate.
Exactly. I think we forget in On Being Human, I talk about one of the great epiphanies of my life is I get to change my mind. And I think it's something we forget. Or we could even say I get to change my heart. But I get to change. How about that? And it's something that we forget. And so I'm really big on reminders. What are the reminders that we need to put in place? And I say this all the time in my mind sessions. I call them systems so jokingly because I'm like the least systemy person. I think you and I both are like, thank God we have people helping us, right? But what do you need to put in place to help you remember? And one of the biggest things, if not the biggest, is like, who are your people? Who are you surrounding yourself with? And it's why I love mine because I tell them, like, you just keep coming back here. That's one of your reminders, right? I have sticky notes all over. Maybe the reminder, for you, it's being off social media. It's all these things that help us remember I get to change my mind. I'm not a piece of furniture. I'm not like this stuck, fixed thing, right?
We're not the stuck fixed thing, which I think is so much of our motivation or our possibility in life is we actually feel like not even possibility, but the way that often we exist before we step into the work and is maybe a source of our motivation to be in the work is this feeling like we're a problem that's waiting to be solved, that there's something that needs to be fixed. And we can have things we want to work on and also know we're loved. And I think the model of what we're generally taught is not that. Like this, we become who we think we need to be in order to be loved. And there is the conundrum, because then there has to be an inherent belief that I'm not lovable as I am. And then how do you reject what is, again, normal to then seize what is actually true, which is you are worthy. You are unconditionally loved, but that's not generally modeled for us. I think that's probably why we tend to seek it in religion or tend to see that we get it from Christ, as opposed to you can get it from yourself. And maybe the reminder is this idea that Christ loves you no matter what, or God loves you no matter what. And I'm not making fun of that, but I think it's so interesting that we seek it in this deity or in these doctrines as opposed to seeking it in ourselves. I think that's one of the beautiful things about your book too, On Being Human, is that, and this is why I fell in love with you too, is that I just felt this genuine reminder that it's okay. And it's actually, you aren't loved in spite of your messiness. You're loved because of messiness.
I love that. Courtney and I like became like, she's like my sister. We're like besties, and I remember I would like apologize to her a lot because I always felt like kind of the problem case. Everyone else turned in their shit and she'd be like, Jen, where's your thing? And she's like, and she said this, I mean this more than I've ever meant anything. She goes, I've never once been annoyed with you. You never try to be anyone other than you are. You're just that's who you are. And you don't pretend to be anything else. And I said, well, yeah, I could still do better and like, return an email. But I think what she's saying is I never hide my messiness. I never hide my, like, this is who I am. I don't pretend to be someone else so that everyone else is disappointed, right? Because I'm not that person. I'm not that way. And it just meant so much to me. And it's like what you're saying of like, I can be this way and still be loved. just by sheer fact of being born, I'm worthy. If we all realize that, right? Just there's no reason. You don't need any reason. You just are.
How do we begin to reclaim that? Is it in the rituals, the morning prayers, and then the sort of living up to those with the gentle, compassionate? Because I think a lot of it is this acknowledgement. It's okay that I messed up. And I really think there is something to the yes and. Like, you gotta show up more. You gotta get better. Like, in compassion without expansion just seems kind of lazy.
Bingo. That's why I end my book with the words, now what? I mean, I've never used that exact language. I love that. Compassion without expansion is lazy. But I noticed it at people coming to my workshop, then I'd have like, a groupie and like every month she was at like all over the world and like saying the same things. And all of a sudden it dawned on me. I was like, yes, it's brave. You're talking about what you're afraid of and what, but it felt rehearsed. And I thought, oh my God, you're stuck in that. And yes, wonderful. You acknowledge it, but that's not enough. And I couldn't believe how long it took me. It was like not rocket science, but it's not enough to say, oh, wow, whatever it may be, and then not take, as you call it, inspired action. Or maybe that was yesterday. I had a tarot reading.
Yeah, I didn't say it, but it is great. Inspired action.
I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people, not everyone, because not everyone resonates with you. Not everyone resonates with me. Not everyone resonates with Brene Brown. It is what it is. But the people who resonate with me, it's because I show up exactly as I am. I won't hide in shame. And I show up exactly as I am with confidence and despite and because of it all. And I don't ever say like, I have it figured out. It's like, I'm going through this and I'm very open in who I am with all its perceived flaws or whatever it may be. And I think it's important for us to surround ourselves with people who, I don't want to call them role models, but people who we want to be like. And I don't mean in terms of material bullshit, but like people like you, right? Or for me, like people who are creating the love in their lives, people who are doing love, people who are kind, people who don't have it all together and still show up anyway without shame, people who have a sense of humor, all these ways, those are people I want to be around. And that's important. It's important for me to be around, whether it's virtually or with books or in real life, to be around people I want to be like.
Yeah, same. To be reminded of how we want to be by someone else's way of being, and that we're surrounding ourselves with people who have values we want to emulate. And because I think sometimes, we don't know the behaviors that defend and express values. Like, we might not know what a boundary looks like, but if we're around someone else who has great boundaries, we'll start to hear them. And in a way, we might resent them at first. We'll definitely admire them at the same time. And Lacey Phillips uses the word expanders, like people who expand what is possible for us. And on sort of like a neuroplasticity perspective or a neurological perspective, they're actually showing us in real time what's possible. And like, what a thing to be able to say like, oh, wait, you can have shame and confidence, and that shame can be something not that holds you back or isolates you or is the reason for those things, but is actually the reason you show up unapologetically. That's badass.
Yes. And also who we're surrounding ourselves with. Like, for example, you're in a relationship with Kylie who reflects back to you that. Mm-hmm. You're not in a relationship with someone who you're constantly feeling like you're not enough and you're a piece of shit. I was in a relationship like that a long time ago for 2 whole years, right? So you're in this beautiful relationship. And my guess is, the people who are in your inner world, me included, right? Your close world are the same kind of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
Right? So that's a really big thing that I invite people to do is like really, really take an inventory and without shame. It's not to make yourself feel bad, but take an honest inventory and look at who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
If they are not reflecting back to you who you really are, then you got to figure something out. And look, not everyone, like your boss at work, what are you going to do? Not everyone is someone that you can very easily be like, well, I'm going to cut them out.
Yeah, all right.
But you can have boundaries.
I think it's Seth Godin. I had him on the podcast, and that guy's a boss. And he was saying that you should only take feedback from people you trust. He's saying, like, not the random person who gives you a 1-star rating for your book on Amazon. He's like, all that tells you is that book wasn't for them. And I think we do similar things with people in our lives. Sometimes I get feedback from people on social media that is helpful, certainly, how I could have worded something better, more compassionate. But you can't make everybody happy, and in the pursuit to do that, you will make yourself incredibly miserable. And I think social media has made that
Totally.
a challenging thing, especially for codependent people. It's a brilliant place for a narcissist and a painful place for a codependent person. Anyone who's empathic.
I mean, depends on the day, right? Depends
Right,
on the
right.
day. I was joking yesterday. I have this amazing friend named James Joyce, not the writer. He lives in Santa Barbara, which is just like right over there. And he does a really cool thing. This is a plug for you, James, called Coffee with a Black Guy, which is exactly what it sounds like. And he does these gatherings. He's just amazing. And so I wanted him to meet someone. We fell in love. I mean, again, not in that way. He's like my brother. I love him. I sent him a text. I wanted him to meet someone, and I said, "Yeah, she moved here from Brooklyn." And he goes, "Here, like in Ojai," because he doesn't live in Ojai. And I was like, God, I'm narcissist. Everything's here. Like there's someone's in Paris, and I'm like here, as if wherever I am is the here. I love that you said that though. That social media is a brilliant place for a narcissist, painful for codependent. And probably the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is having a sense of humor. That is the way that another way we begin to remember that we're worthy, just simply because when we're able to not take ourselves so seriously.
God, what a beautiful moment that is. It's a challenging thing to do, because I think when we're used to maybe seeking perfectionism or seeking belonging, we take everything very seriously, because we think every single sentence, every single word, every single action is going to determine whether we love ourselves or not, or maybe even more so, whether someone else loves us. And it's such an act of reclamation. There's that great meme. I don't know who wrote it, but it's like, your hair is messy, show up anyway. Like essentially that. I think it might have been Glennon Doyle.
I wish that I cared more about my hair being messy. I mean, so many people are always like, "Jen, brush your hair." Yeah, I'm just like, I mean, and that's the thing about about not taking yourself seriously. I'll joke all the time. I'll say, "Look, I'm as vain as the next guy," but I really don't give a shit. Like someone will take a picture and like they'll go, "Do you want to see it first before I post it?" I don't give a shit. Just I just don't care. And it's a real interesting dichotomy, because of course I'm as vain as the next guy, but like I also don't give a shit. If you're able to laugh at yourself like that, it's liberating. The world is hard enough. It really, really is. It's stinking hard, My today's Charlie's birthday, so my sister and my nephew are coming, and you've heard me a gazillion times talk about my nephew who has Prader-Willi syndrome, and he is starving to death 24/7, like the worst possible pain of hunger you can imagine, and nothing will make it go away. That's hard. So like us making our lives hard with like other, and look, there's no hierarchy of grief and pain, all that stuff. I'm just saying life is hard, so we don't need to add to it by taking ourselves so seriously.
Yeah, yeah. I that makes me think of a meme I saw. Life in memes. Yeah,
Oh my God,
everything's a
everything's like, and then
fucking
I saw
meme.
this meme.
I guess it's a piece of writing. So I saw this piece of writing that
Yeah,
said, it just
yeah.
happened to be on an image in a square on Instagram. And it said, like, essentially, being authentic is hard, hiding yourself is hard, choose your hard.
Oh God, that's good. Say it again. Being authentic is hard.
And hiding who you are is hard, choose your hard. And I thought, what an interesting perspective, because it got a lot of pushback, because it also had like, choosing healthy foods is hard and doing that is hard, choose your hard. Being obese is hard, and so is working out is hard, choose your hard. And of course, like, I think in a lot of ways it's hard to have, speaking of, it's hard to have conversations these days, because what I find, if you're not willing to have the conversations because you're afraid of being canceled, then you participate in the cancellation of conversations. And that's challenging, because of course the words we speak can contribute to not belonging or being canceled. And so I feel like there is often sort of a collective eggshelling that occurs. And
Mm.
I just feel like I've been thinking about that a lot lately, like that our world is continuing to seemingly, this might just be my own experience, so I'll own that. But the world seems to be oscillating around the people with one part, some of the highest levels of anxiety, and also the people who have the lowest capacity for discourse. The very people who cannot have meaningful exchange, maybe because they don't have the skill, maybe because they have trauma, maybe all the pathologies can exist in the world. And that's who's deciding what we can talk about. And I have compassion for where that comes from. But I also am like, how do we as people somehow move to a place where we see each other more, we acknowledge each other more, we contribute to conversation more, we dialogue more, when there's such a fear of being on the bridge? And I mean the bridge, I mean sort of like the space between you and I, the bridge between all these different binaries. And I know that probably sounds political in a way. It is, it's like,
Yeah, I'm considering what you're saying.
I'm curious your thoughts on that. I love all your work, and some of the work that I've loved in your more recent expressions is that you are constantly having these conversations that people are afraid to have. And you're also bringing people on your platforms that are dialoguing about things that what I find is I just fall in love with more and more people.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. And what else is there in this world? What else is there? Jesus. Anyway, before I say anything, though, I want to go back to the meme about being authentic is hard, hiding is hard. I don't know. It does, but being authentic is not hard to me. Is that hard for you? That's interesting. And
I don't think it's hard, but I do think when you initially break out of the mask and the pretending because that was just normalized, I do think that's hard, because what's seemingly on the line is belonging.
you're right. And look, that's why, going back to the girl with the fairy wings, that's why I said, I'm in my 40s and she's 21. And so at 21, I was not as I met up recently with my first love, and he was just like, "You haven't changed. You're the same." And I stopped and I looked at him. I said, "Oh, but I have." And I said, "I'm way more confident." And he goes, "You've always been confident." And I paused again and I go, "But I used to hate myself back then. I mean, I really did. And like the confidence I have now is so genuine, and I don't want to go back in time or anything. I mean, the fact that it is not hard or scary for me to be authentic at all. But I think back then, I mean, look, I couldn't even tell people I was going deaf. So,
What were you afraid that people would think in your expression of going deaf?
well, it was more complicated than just that. But I'll tell you, shout out to Vienna, my origin story, I suppose, if I'm using it correctly. But I thought it was my fault. I thought I killed my dad essentially because he said, "You're being bad." And I said, "I hate you." And he dropped dead. And so I made a decision then and there at 8 that I was a bad person. And that was like the guiding force. It wasn't conscious, it was just like a knowing. So the first thing when I was younger, even before the denial, was fear. I was afraid. Well, first I just denied it to myself. Then I was afraid to say it out loud because if I did, that would make it real. If I didn't, and I still have this tendency, if I don't acknowledge something going on, it'll go away. If I don't, friends listening, that doesn't work.
No, it does not. You can't sweep it under a rug and you can't drug it away.
Right. And so I just kept, if I don't say it out loud, it's not real. And then the other part of it, the shame part, was I already believed I was a bad person. And so now I'm broken too. So I was like, "Oh, I thought something was wrong with me. I was disabled." I mean, you name it. And when I was younger, hearing aids were like big and people made fun and just all this childhood stuff. But I felt like I was broken. Oh, I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. And I was also terrified of it all, that it's going to keep getting worse. And one day I'd wake up and there'd be no sound, nothing. And I don't know sign language, and just so complicated, so many layers. And like shame is also not rational or logical. So do not waste any time trying to figure it out. It's silly. I mean, it's like it was cellular. There was no logic around the shame that I felt.
Do you think it was hard to pathologize the shame? As you said, it's not logical. Do you think it's hard to make it logical because inherently, like this idea that something's wrong with me because I'm disabled, or something's wrong with me because the last words I said to my dad were this, and then he passed, and no adult was there to translate all of it for you and to make it not your responsibility. There's a story that Francis Weller tells in one of his lectures where he talks about this little girl who gets abused, I think like boiling water poured on her face by her mom. And the mother gets, the consequences from that. And the family, the tribe, the group sit her down and say, it's not your fault. You are so loved. Like that intervention occurs really the minute after the violation. And I just think of like how, if you don't have that modeled, which do we even have that modeled? Like where we can model it, we can begin to see how valuable that is as a culture, as a community. And that's where I think cancel culture is such an instant exiling for even something from your past. And it doesn't model restorative justice or restoration.
No, it doesn't. I hate it. I think it's terrible. I mean, we got, I have ADD, so that's happened. We got all over the place with that original, question. But really quick, back to that little girl. Oh, that's so tender and breaks my heart. That so often doesn't happen because when people are abused, they don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, or it's not known. And with me, I don't know that I ever even said it out loud. I talk about this now, but I never at the time, I wouldn't.
You never told anyone?
No, I would, what? The next morning, I came in and they said, "We have something to tell you." And I said, "I already know. My dad died." And and they said he died, and I said, "I don't care." And I locked my jaw and I shoved it all, and I said, "Be strong, be strong." I mean, that's the chant of my life. And I knew it was my fault. This is the price you're going to pay, and you better be strong. And no. And then I went to therapy, and because I'm smart and I was able to, this goes back to like it's not enough, right? I was able to like say the things, and so people have always been wowed by how self-aware I am. And guess what? It doesn't mean I can talk the talk. It doesn't mean anything if you're still thinking the same thoughts, doing the same things, behaving the same way. If you're fine, great, you're self-aware.
You were able to linguistically maneuver around all of that, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and look, I didn't have this kind of words, but I was, I'm fine. And somehow I convinced a lot of people that I was fine. I was so not fine. But I wouldn't talk, I wouldn't open up, I wouldn't share. I remember I had a therapist, I think I was in 6th grade, and the only way I'd go is if we'd play games, like board games. And I mean, I wouldn't talk to him, and I never, I just wouldn't. I would not. I locked everything inside of me. And also, if this happened as an adult, right? You say I hate you, and that's the last words, and you're able to like process it differently. When you're 8 years old, my god, your whole world is about you, right? Of course it's my fault. So this cancel culture, I hate it, and I hate how in fear we all are, and you could just sense it all the time. There are some things I stay away from for because I just don't energetically have the interest to engage. Like I remember when Charlie was born, I started No Bullshit Motherhood. I was like not about to bring up vaccines with, I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about kid vaccines. So before the whole COVID thing, I was like, oh yeah, it's not even like, I'm not even interested in opening that can of worms. And I'm like, that's not where I choose to put my energy battling with a bunch of strangers on the internet, right? So there's some choices that I will and I won't make. Yeah, I have a lot of conversations with people and just, on my own of things that I suppose a lot of people are afraid to say. And I don't know if it's because of my commitment to not hiding in shame, but I do it. I mean, I definitely think you're braver in a lot of ways. There are a lot of, things I've seen you say or do where I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're okay with like, oh, if I hate the idea of followers too, but if I lose a ton of followers, right? And for me that taps into this like fear of like I'm going to end up homeless then, because what if everyone leaves and then no more, all the spiral, right?
Right. Yeah, which is so human and so normal. And although I might have presented as not having those thoughts, feelings, or concerns, of course I do. Of course I have. Of course I still do. There's like an edge to what I talk about. Like, and when I say an edge, I don't mean literally the words I'm speaking are edgy. I mean that I'm on the edge of what I'm comfortable. I feel like it's getting further and further away from the need to be loved or belong, but it's still centered in my experience. Like it's still the thing that the little boy in me thinks about. And I remember my sister, when I first started writing about relationships, she said to me, "You'll know you're doing good work if a third of people don't like you." And I was like, "A third? Like, can we make it maybe like 10%? Like, I think I can hold 10%." But like, as someone who in my middle childhood, 7, 8, 9, 10, that age where I think kids start to become, there's sort of hierarchy gets created, social status gets created in like junior high years, 11, 12, 13. And as someone who wasn't at the top, which I think is interesting when you look at I forget what the theory is, but it's about how systems work. And what they say is that the theory is that the people who know how the system works are actually the people at the bottom, not the people at the top who made the system, because the people at the bottom have to navigate the system. And so the people at the top of social hierarchy don't really understand the hierarchy. And I found myself not even realizing there was a hierarchy till grade 7, grade 8, when all of a sudden people are hitting puberty and social structures being put into place. And I found myself envying the people at the top and these guys, although they might not have any awareness of it, but these guys who were my best friends the year before, I'm now like wanting them to love me.
God, I mean, it's like bringing me back. You even saying this stuff. It's like it's giving me anxiety actually remembering like 8th grade, 9th grade, but wow.
It's such a hard, because like what a thing for a kid to navigate. And at the time, social media didn't exist, which that made it less complex. Right. And so I think of kids today, and I mean, what a beautiful honor it would be if young people listen to this podcast. But to actually even consider or even teach them, hey, this is what you're actually navigating. This is why you have anxiety. This is why, like, you think of social media as really a weapon of belonging. And again, like, that, just sort of come back to what I was saying before, is that the little boy in me that still sort of in the face of that hierarchy doesn't want to say something for fear I'll fall further down the ladder. And also the recognition today that I'm blessed to have a voice and blessed to have, through people's perception, perhaps being higher on a hierarchy that people create. But that's why I think it's so important to push ourselves to say the thing that risks the belonging.
Absolutely. And I do. I guess my point is I'm really discerning with that. I'm not saying you are not. We always get to choose what we're sharing, who we're spending time, all of it, in terms of energy. Like, do I want to even spend any energy on this? Not really. So I'm not even going to open that can of worms, right?
Right. And I think when we're looking to grow ourselves personally, our energy has to go into breaking down the barriers of who we've been. Like, I think it's an incredible privilege to be able, not in a bad way. I know that word's kind of thrown around, but I think it is an incredible privilege to be able to argue about specific or communicate or discuss specific outcomes in society. And, when I think about being in the depths of figuring out who I am, and I think that's a never ending thing, but in the depths of it, in the depths of the remembering and the deconstruction and the reconstruction, all my energy has gone into that. Like, it went into that. And, I'm curious of your experience when you sort of maybe first had your fall from grace or first had this awareness that the shame wasn't the reason you should hide. What was that like?
Whew, there's been so much shame in my life. I mean, I think a lot of our lives, but I look at by now, well, actually, I think a lot of people listening don't know who I am. So maybe this is a fun new person that they've never heard. But I was at NYU and I was just like on this path. I thought I was going to be a poet and teach in academia. And I had a year left, and I was going to take a semester off, and I got a summer job at a West Hollywood restaurant, and I stayed 14 years, and I never went back to college, and I mean, the shame, and it just grew year after year, right? So my way out was I became a yoga teacher, and I became kind of a well-known yoga teacher, and I started writing again. I got back to my bones, and I started writing like silly blogs, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna be me. And I started writing about grief and depression and all these things, like being on antidepressants. And back then, this was revolutionary. This was not like it is now on the internet. And especially because of what I was doing. I was a yoga teacher. And again, back then it was different. There was like this sort of like, spiritual bypassing. And if you're a yogi, then you're pure and you meditate, you don't medicate. And I started sharing these things, and I was afraid, of course. I had made my way out of the restaurant, and I was afraid, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything. And I did it anyway. I remember even once I made a video and I just talked about it, and I thought, oh, this is going to be the thing. And the opposite happened. And that gave me courage. And I think I want to say something about that in a minute, but people came out of the woodwork thanking me. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. So maybe all the things I've been hiding are actually what really need to be shared, and what the world needs. And by the world, I just mean the person in front of me, or someone, anyone. And I began the process of not hiding. So yeah, maybe like back then it was scarier. Now it's not. Well, certain things aren't scary. To talk about depression and just, but there are other things that are scary. So I want to go back to what I said though, is that it gave me courage. So back then I needed that, right? And sometimes still you get that hit, that dopamine hit, you get the yeah, keep going, the high five. And I needed that, and that kept me writing. I mean, ultimately I wrote a book, right? Because I kept getting validation. And that's also so scary and terrible, because I sometimes still feel that need. And I think back then I needed it because it got me out of this stuck place. It got me out of hiding. But I don't ever, ever want to feel like I'm relying on validation to be who I am, or to create art, or to make something, or to, you know what I mean?
Right. I remember Jeremy Goldberg, I think it was, who said to me, I was being given the guidance to ignore negative comments on social media. And he said, if you're going to ignore the negative ones, what are you going to do with the good ones? Essentially, like, you can't be selective. Like, one will go to your ego and the other one will deplete it. But like, what about just not engaging? And I was like, oh, wow, that's such an interesting, good call forward to be like, you can't just feed yourself, and again, that validation then shapes the content we put out. It shapes, and I remember early on when Instagram, had, I guess, a little more rewarding of an algorithm. Early on, if you wrote a poem or a post about female empowerment, you could guarantee it was going to do well. Like, she's a warrior with the sword. That automatically, she has wings, she flies, boom, million likes. I'm exaggerating, but not really. And I remember kind of thinking to myself pretty early on of having an Instagram, thinking, okay, well, if I post this thing, I know it will do well and get engagement. Or I post what I really want to say and what I want to write. And I remember making that rule in that moment, that like, the only intention I had or have for anything I share is to change one life. And that doesn't even have to be significant. Like, it's whatever, right?
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I'm
But
right there
just
with you.
that
Yeah.
one
Yep.
person, if I'm inspired to write something, is somehow shifted in whatever way, even if it's humor, then that post has served its mission. And I remember making that commitment. Like, I'm not going to do it for the likes or the applause, because, seemingly in life, if you're doing things for applause, you'll always be wanting to do things to get that, as opposed to just like, do I love who I'm being?
And that's why I said it's so dangerous, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so that was the decision I made all those years ago. I was just like writing these blogs and stuff because I wanted my classes to fill.
Mm.
And then I made that same distinction you said. All of a sudden I was like, nope, from now on, only what I want to say.
And then it took off.
Right. And it is dangerous, though. I do think there's value. We want to know. And anyone who says they don't, I really think is lying. We want to know if we write something that someone read it. I do. So there's that balance of wanting to know I think about the lies I've told. Like, writing a book, you go, I mean, at least I know if one person read it,
Right.
I'd be happy. That's a lie. Why did I lie? That's such a lie. I didn't want just one person to read it. I wanted to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, however, the difference is like, yes, if you know that you've impacted someone or made a difference, I mean, that's doing love. And talk about worthiness, right? And us just being ourselves. I think we forget a lot how powerful we are. We don't have to write a fucking post. You just being who you are. You just stopping and looking someone in the eye or saying hello to someone. Or when I waited tables, like, I could see someone was upset from the hospital next door. They were coming over maybe to get lunch while their mother was dying, and you put your hand on their shoulder or you stop and you talk. You could change their life. And that is like affecting one person, changing a life, literally.
Just by being you.
Yes, just by being you. And people will look at you or me or Glennon Doyle, they'll look at someone that's like, oh, well, they're powerful or they have a lot of people who buy their books or listen to them and all that's bullshit. Fine. But it's not about that. You cannot ever forget how powerful you are. Ever. Ever.
Yeah, in you changing what you were writing from what you think people would want to hear to fill your yoga classes, and that being the intention, to you telling the truth in whatever capacity that meant in that moment, is really what people wanted to hear, which and is really what began to sort of like raise or elevate you in terms of being the content being consumed, because people are like, oh, I see myself in this. And it's I interviewed a friend of mine, Joe Sheehy, yesterday, and he has a company called Cured Nutrition. And he was saying that he went to this therapist, and the therapist, he only had one session with this therapist, and he's telling this therapist about the dream he has, and he's working at a aerospace engineering job, blah blah blah, and he has this dream of the company he wants to create. And the therapist writes on a card, hands it to him, and all it says is permission.
Oh my God.
And
I love that. Ah.
and he says he still has the card to this day, but I think of that as like often by being ourselves, it doesn't mean you have to have a platform. It just means you just have to be a human who exists in every day. Just by being ourselves, it is permission for other people. Like in giving ourselves permission, we remind other people to give themselves permission. It's a crazy sort of viral possibility, when you consider it.
Yeah. And people say that to me a lot. They're like, that's why I listen, you give me permission to be who I am. And sometimes I get like, well, I'm not giving anyone like, but I understand what they mean, because it goes back to what I was saying about also when we see someone who we admire, like really for who they are, and they're being a way that doesn't maybe line up with tradition, going back to what you're talking about, like normal or abnormal. What was the word you used? Abnormal. It's a sort of permission, like, oh, so Jen's successful and she has ADD and she talks about being on meds and she's wildly disorganized.
She's
All
wildly
the ands,
disorganized.
and she's successful. Yeah, and she's successful. People go, oh, well, maybe I'm thinking about success the wrong way, or maybe it's possible for me to be who I am and still have a big, beautiful life. Oh, yes, there's so many people who I think about with authors. I remember when I call her my wifey, but Lydia Yuknovich, who wrote the foreword to my book. I remember when I read her memoir, Chronology of Water, which Kristen Stewart is making into a movie, directing it. It gave me so much permission to break the rules, to do whatever. And so I will forever feel that way. I mean, it wasn't her intention, right? When she wrote the book, it wasn't for me, but I read it and I go, oh man, look what she's doing. It felt like a permission slip.
It's almost like the book is encoded in that. So that's what you get.
Yeah, and when people break the rules, and I don't mean like run stop signs, but when people you break the rules a lot, right? And when you were talking earlier about the dating stuff, I break the rules all the time. I hate scheduling calls with my friends. I don't do it. I'm like, just, like I love it. Sometimes you'll just call me or, I'll FaceTime someone and people only text. And I know all these people joke, they're like, oh, she called. That is so rude. I think it's fascinating. I break the rules. Like, I want to hear your voice. Ironically, I hear better through the phone because it streams through my hearing aids, But that doesn't mean the person can always answer. It's going to be a long conversation, but I break the rules a lot with that.
I like that.
But permission slips, and they're everywhere, and we get to give ourselves permission slips all the time.
You got to wonder what permission is someone listening waiting for, and to just write it on a piece of paper. I like your today, may I remember.
So here's a really good thing to share. So as everyone knows, because I shared, I dropped out of college, and I lied about it for a long time. People will say, what year did you graduate? And I'm all like calculating, I had a year left. I didn't finish. So I have done these writing workshops now. I started in January. I don't know. I've done 2 now. And each time there's 100 people in it. And it's not cheap. It's $150. And I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, that's right. Talking to myself, mind you. I'm talking to my inner asshole that said, you don't have an MFA. You don't have 5 books out. You don't, look at that. 100 people, right? And the workshop, and it's a writing workshop. It's not, I didn't also coerce them by yoga. I often trick people to get them in the room. And I use that very jokingly, but by saying, like, it's a yoga class, when really it's like, yeah, we do some yoga poses, but so it was just writing. And so it's called allow. And that word is one of my very favorite words, allow. One of the first things I say in the writing workshop is like, in order to be here, you got to say this sentence and mean it. I'm willing to be bad. I'm willing to be bad. And then I often have them write about a time you were bad, and you can make bad mean whatever you want. Like, it can be interpreted in so many ways. But what you're doing is you're letting yourself off the hook before you even begin. Meaning, like, you don't have to be a good writer, or you don't even have to have ever written. You just show up. It's called allow. And again, it's a permission slip. It's a permission slip to be, to put a pen to paper or finger to the computer, whether you are terrible at grammar, whether your inner asshole said you're a terrible, whatever, it's a permission slip. Allow it. Allow yourself to be bad.
That's how inevitably, I suppose, we become good.
Exactly. And so many times the most hilarious thing is, I'm willing to be bad. And by letting ourselves off the hook, like that, yeah, the shit's never bad. It's so profound. These people read things and I'm like, who even are you? Oh my God. I started this poetry challenge. I have 200 people in this group writing poems every day. Like, I brought poems, but what? Right? This like breaking the rules, it's so cool. And these people are sharing it unabashedly. People who, I don't know what a poem is. They're saying, I can't write. And there they are, just sharing them in this group. And it's permission. What if we gave ourselves more permission more often? That's why, I gave a keynote. I don't know if I sent you the link. I went to a couple weeks ago in Miami, which I'm very, very proud of. And it was on recovery. It was a big recovery conference. And when I first booked the job 2 years ago, I had complete imposter syndrome because I didn't know that it was about recovery for everything, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not in recovery for substance or drinking. And, that's a whole other thing. Maybe I could be, but it was me, Abby Wambach, and Nadia Boltz-Weber. But COVID canceled. And so 2 years delayed. And it was no longer Abby. It ended up being Ashley Judd, which was bananas because Saturday night she gave her keynote and talked a lot about her mom. And a few days later, her mom died by suicide. So anyway, I'm up on stage and I'm giving my thing about you could be in recovery from anything. And look, mind is all about that, right? So in the middle of my keynote, I pause and I signal the guy in the back and I do my thing. I have him play Don't Stop Believing. And I tell the audience, I said, you're going to sing, you're going to dork it out, I call it. And dorking it out is exactly what it sounds like. It's, yes, you can take it literally and be dorky, but it's allowing yourself to be free. It's allowing yourself to be free. And so I say, you're going to stand up if you can. If you can't, fine. And you're going to dance. And if you're in a wheelchair, you could breathe, you could just sing. And if you don't know the words, you're going to make them up. And my God, there's 500 people. And we all sang Don't Stop Believing. I said, get on the stage. And like, and I mean, it was magic, magic, magic. And mind you, no drugs or alcohol, right? Everyone's stone cold sober. So then they sit back down and the energy, I mean, the room is buzzing. It's on fire. And I always do this. I pause and I'm like, do you feel it? And they do. I go, what if we lived our lives more from this place? And that place, that the freedom that comes with singing out loud and dorking it out, that's a tool to get there. And I know it seems silly and it's fun, which is underrated, but you tap into that energy. Like, what if I operated more from this place? What if, right? And that's the permission slip again. Dorking it out. It's all allow. It's all the same. It's just different words for the same thing. What if we allowed ourselves more to be free, to say what we want to say? And that's not to say to just rattle off anything without thinking about it first, right? A couple of years ago, I was at the gym and I have a weird habit. I'm like always rubbing my stomach. And this guy comes up to me and he puts his hand on my fucking stomach and he goes, Jen, are you expecting? And I'm like, hey, listen, there are times where you just got to pause before you say what's on your mind, you know? Just pause. That's all. Pause. Permission. Permission granted. And never ask a woman if she's pregnant unless you know for sure she is, or you made her pregnant, or like the baby is like coming out of her. I'm not kidding around.
That's a very wise piece of sage advice.
It's just, yeah. And also, don't comment on bodies. Don't comment on bodies. You want to, someone looks, you say, you look great. You look beautiful. You look brilliant. Body commenting. Just don't get it.
Jen Pastiloff. Sermon.
Well, I mean, look, on Mind on Sundays, what's it called? Sunday services with Jen, but I've never called it that. I've called it Church with a Jew since day one.
Church with
and
Jew.
I refuse to stop.
That's great.
I refuse to stop. Church with a Jew. And people, they'll text me like, are you doing Church with a Jew today?
That's so good. That's so
Oh my
good.
God, my dad is just up there like, because before he died, I was, uber Jew. I went to yeshiva, I spoke Hebrew, and then he died, and that was that. I never even had a bat mitzvah. So it just tickles me because I'm just like, I'm Jew-ish, but I'm like, I'm always like, when's the high holy holiday again? I mean, it was yesterday. Yeah. But it's in me, and it just tickles me. It makes me laugh. And anything that makes me laugh is a good thing. So
agreed. And Sunday services, on Mind. And for you guys listening, if you don't know, Mind is the app that Jen and I are both teachers on. You can check it out at doyoumind, MINED.com and download it. And it's really an unbelievable place. It's like live and on demand, relational, emotional, community, health, all the things. You can, whatever you want to learn about exists on there.
There really are so many people to learn from, and we're called experts, and I always put it in air quotes because I think everyone's an expert, So it's like, may I always be a student, but there are so many beautiful people on the app that I'm always in awe. Like, what?
Me too. So Jen, where do people find you? Where your workshops go? Where they can find out more about that?
Well, my address is, just kidding. People find me at jenniferpastiloff.com. I'd love it if you haven't read my book yet, you get On Being Human. And if you want to do Audible, it's me narrating.
Oh, Jen's book is unreal, people. Go buy Jen's book. And your Instagram's funny. Go check out her Instagram. We'll link all of it in the show notes.
Yeah, my Instagram's funny and sometimes really depressing, and also sometimes really just random and boring and amazing. And it's I certainly don't I don't have any kind of color palette or rules, and it's completely me. I lead writing workshops now and shame loss. Now I'm back to doing some in-person retreats. I have Italy coming up, and so, and you find me on Mind. I'd love for you to join us all on Mind, but find me on my website and get on my mailing list. I send out pretty great emails, if I don't say so myself, every week.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure we link it all out, and thank you for coming on and sharing you.
Yeah, thank you. I just love you.
Me too. That was so much fun.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, one of the best ways to support the show is to go subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any more. leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it, or share the episode with your community on Instagram or whatever social place you like to hang out. This helps get it into more people's ears, and I'm so grateful for your support, always. Thanks again for tuning in. Much love.